Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it's also uploaded as a YouTube video under the channel of Zenitsu, on top of being in various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. Please feel free to leave that rating, like, follow, subscribe, and whatever, depending on the platform that you're listening on. It really does help support the podcast. So today I am back with Jay Stewart, and we are going to be talking about Special Booster 2.0 now that we actually have experience opening it and ideally playing a little bit with it. And kind of just giving more of our overall thoughts and impressions on the set and where it's going to go and with the direction that it's going to take the game in. So that kind of leads us into the question of the week. So feel free to make sure in the comments below if you want to answer it. You're more than welcome to answer it. So this week's question is, do you think that this is actually a good starting point for new players? More in terms of like 2.0, but kind of like the stuff around 2.0, like just this little pocket of time. Is this a good starting point for new players to want to pick up and play Digimon?
Yeah, so I think with me, it kind of depends on the player. Are they trying to be competitive or are they trying to be more of play for fun kind of thing? Because I feel like if they're trying to do that, if they're trying to play competitively, they're still going to need a bunch of the older stuff just because of how powerful that old stuff is. But if they're like a brand new player who's just looking to bring something to locals and everything, then you could argue that this is a good set for them because there is still a few decks in there that are just built into this set alone, like the Bees deck, the Millenniumon deck, the Lord Nimon deck, Black Base that you could play. There's a couple that a new player could play, have fun with. But as far as meta wise, I don't know if I would say if they're looking for metative competitive, that'd be a little bit of a harder story for them. There's good stuff in here, just not enough to bring to locals or to bring to like regionals and win with that.
I kind of think like you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of like sharing that perspective. I think like from a more hardcore competitive standpoint, this set is not really going to be something that newer players wanting to be in that like high echelon competition, like I, as a competitive player myself, I already looked at the set and I'm just like, cool, I need maybe a small handful of cards to upgrade some of my current decks, and that's pretty much it. And I could just ignore the vast majority of it. And that's like pretty sad from a sales standpoint, where like if I'm the player that they're trying to cater towards, this set does me absolutely nothing. I'm not saying the other half of BT19 would have made it any better. It's just the design and the direction of the game isn't necessarily where BT 18 and 19 needed to be on par with what we currently have. I do think, though, the inverse, as a casual player, like something you just want to like open and build towards and just something to get that's easy and can have a lot of fun and still do something at least halfway decent mechanically, I think this set is fantastic. Like it kind of rings and hits all of the same highs as an EX set in my perspective. Like this just feels like a more feature complete EX set, because EX sets also have that same similar feel where you just have a couple of decks that you could build towards and upgrade and ideally get some support later on, and this kind of just has that same style of feel. And in terms of the open feel, the set kind of felt pretty fun to open, considering mathematically one in every other pack you should see like a high rarity card, because we do know the pull rates from this set just based on other YouTubers talking about it and us actually opening and experiencing it. So if anyone's unfamiliar with the pull rates, we are going to get a minimum of 10 super rares. You could get lucky, and you could get boxes where you get 11 super rares. Then you are going to get 3 hits, which is going to be a guaranteed secret rare, it seems like. I haven't seen or heard of anyone not getting a secret rare in their box. And then the other 2 are going to be either more secret rares or alt arts. There's a higher chance leaning towards alt arts, considering they share like a similar pool. So that's pretty good in terms of actually being able to get the high rarity cards that we need in order to play. And yes, it is going to impact the lower rarity cards, but I would rather take like a $2, maybe $3 at most rare versus a $20 super rare. Like, I 100% would happily make that trade. And, like, sure, you could say that they could have impacted the even lower rarity stuff, like the commons and uncommons, but, like, the moral of the story is there was actually no way to fully win to make people happy. So they just did what they kind of have done in the past and just impacted the rares more specifically. And I don't necessarily think it's going to be that big of a deal in the long run. It all just depends on how much is actually open and how much is floating around. Which, again, if the set's opened en masse, it makes the cards still somewhat easier to get, so that way new players, even if they don't open a whole bunch of boxes, they could still reasonably be able to complete their decks without spending a small fortune.
Yeah. Plus, also, if people are going to say, "Oh, they're taking away the rare spots," this is definitely better than how BT11 did it, because you had a guaranteed 7 SRs and then 2 alt arts. Plus, you had on top of that the 7 campaign rares, with the chance of another rare slot getting taken by a foiled common or uncommon card, if I remember correctly, which was
Yeah.
really hard on rares in that set.
Yeah, that's like, I would rather have the rares be replaced with cards that I would want versus cards that I wouldn't want. And I think that's like the big distinction and difference between like how the set feels to open. It's just like, okay, I still can see the majority of the rares in a single booster box. Sure, I'm not going to see them all, but at least all of the cards that I'm opening have some initial value. Common and uncommon foils, they're like fine. They're not my favorite thing in the world. I kind of liked what EX7 did with them. But to me, I'm not a shiny person. I'm not a shiny collector, and seeing low rarity cards foiled just does me absolutely nothing. But I know I am an exception to the rule. I'm not like making or breaking Bandai's decision or anything. They'll do what they want regardless. And some people really do like low rarity foil cards, but that's kind of why they do like some low rarity alt arts. So like some of the rares and uncommons based on their theming do get an alt art in the set. So that way you could have like that connecting art that they did, which I kind of find to be cool whenever they do that. So there's a lot of like multi-connecting art, and that's how you would get your higher rarity, like your higher rarity, low rarity cards.
Yeah,
So
because I was honestly kind of surprised. It's been a little bit since they brought back that connecting art too, I think. But
they like
I'm
to
glad
use
to
it
see it
every
back.
yeah, they like to use it every now and then, and I think like they the sets that they use it in make sense. It's not something they want to like overdo, because then it ruins like the specialness of when they do it. Especially with how much, like how many different cards they're trying to connect. Because we have seen like Bandai Premium where they do the multi-connecting cards, but that's Bandai Premium. That's their room for experimentation like that. But overall, I think like if you are a newer player that's just trying to be a little bit more casual, this is a good like place to get into the game. But as a competitive player, you're just gonna want to pick and choose your battles a little bit more wisely in terms of like product to actually buy. That'll help you get to be in the state that you need it to be. And speaking of competition, we actually do have more EX7 metadata to go over. We have the vast majority of EX7 metadata. I think we're literally just missing one event at this point from 401 Games, which is uh, one of the events that I participated in. And that was an Ultimate Cup. So if anyone's curious on my record, I went 5-4, or no, I went 5-3. I played Mirage, and I lost to two 50-50s because the Mirror is obviously a 50-50, and Fen is a 50-50 because we're both OTK decks. And then the only loss that I had outside of an actual 50-50 was to Magnamon, and that was a very, very interesting game, and uh, definitely interesting player as well to play against. But just as a frame of reference, I think that the Magna player ended up getting in third place, and one of the other people that I lost, I can't remember if it was the Fen or the Mirage. One of them got like six or was in top 16. So two of my losses were to top 16 players in my defense for my medium performance. Um, but in terms of like the other data that we actually do have, let me pull it up really quick. We have one store regional, we have a Mexico regional, and Raid and Trade, which is European regional. So going over the Mexican regional real quick, because this is the one that I think is a little bit more interesting because it gives us something different to actually talk about. Considering the majority of the meta is basically stale at this point, no shocker, not many things are entering the format, and everything that already has been winning is still the only things that are winning. This format gave us a blue flare deck. So going over the top 16 archetype breakdown, there was 5 Mirages, 3 Imperials, 2 Fens, 2 Yellow Vaccines, the armor variant. Dominimon just seems like it's struggling too much versus armors. 1 Magnamon X, 1 Ancient Grey, 1 Blue Flare, and 1 Levia X. And the Blue Flare player got in 8th place. I'm not really going to go over any of the other, like, the top to bottom breakdown because at this point it functionally just doesn't matter, especially since it's still all the same 8-9 decks that we've been seeing on repeat for the entire format. So as far as the Blue Flare deck, though, they are running the Ukamon package because, you know, they could still run 5 Ukamons. It's not as good as 8 Ukamons, but that's still something. Interesting that they're not choosing to buffer out the other slots with another rookie. Instead, they are just trying to go for more ace trapping. So they are running the BT10 and the EX4 package of male birds and Greymons. They're not playing anything else but that outside of 2 starter deck red Greymons. Just because generic security attack plus on a Greymon name is really good, especially since it can be crossed with the BT10 Metal Greymon. It can't cross with the EX4 one, though, so you do have to note that. But the fact that it's still a good piece to use for the best Metal Greymon for the deck is important, because the deck does struggle against Digimon, like single, like decks where they only have one body out, because the gimmick of Blue Flares is to take advantage of multiple bodies to be able to stun them all, and then kind of just aggress based on the fact that they have multiple bodies. So the starter deck Greymon helps shore up that weakness where they could apply pressure even if they only have one singular body out. Then they also have 1 copy of Zudo Ace to kind of like use in combination with your Gaussmons, because the Gaussmon that they're playing is the BT10 one. So when it dies, it plays out a level 4, and they don't have to cross with that right away. They could either wait for the opponent to kill it with save, swing with it to be aggressive, or Zudo Ace to ace bait them. Then they're also running, as far as tech cards, one Cyber Launcher, probably just to act as a good way to bounce rookies, because that's something the deck doesn't really have a lot of, because it's not trying to remove bodies. So Cyber Launcher is definitely pretty good at trying to out certain floodgates. Then when it comes to the higher level stuff, the only other like real surprise card is Vikemon Ace, because most of the time you're just aggroing with level 5s. So it makes sense to have like an Ace bait for level 6s, and Vikemon with D-Digivolve and potentially stunning the field is like actually really good. So it's nice to see that Vikemon Ace is working in this build, and they're just running an Omnimon just because Omni for game is still a thing, like the BT5 Omni. And then everything else outside of Sorai is pretty fairly standardized. Like, it's not really doing anything like crazy that we haven't seen. It just looks like a very clean list, and maybe Sorai is like actually a better card than I'm giving it credit for. The deck was kind of running it before, but phased it out, and now it's being phased back in. Maybe that's just a combo with Vike and Zudo a little bit better, just because stripping the opponent's sources is actually really good right now, just because soft removal is some of the best removal, because everything else has insane levels of protection. So that is the Mexico regional. And then taking a look at the Raid and Trade regional, as I pull up that. There we go. Wrong tab. I should have had this organized before. How unprofessional of me. All right, here we go. So the Raid and Trade regional, there is less to talk about because it is exactly what we would expect from an event at this point in terms of the decks that are being represented. So we had 4 7 Great Demon Lords, 3 Mirages, 2 Fens, 2 Dexterugoras, 1 Leviamon, 1 Magnamon X, 1 Imperial, 1 Ancient Gru, and 1 Ancient Greymon. And then the winner of this event was a Leviamon, and I don't think I mentioned the winner of the Mexico regional, but that was a Mirage. So Mirage won Mexico, Leviamon won Raid and Trade. And again, nothing new broke into this format. Everything is already to be expected, and based on how BT 18 and 19 look, it's going to be the majority of the same, just with Lord Nightmon being the only real thing to kind of shake things up, at least in my competitive perspective. And then if people want, there is also the Store Regional, which I think Store Regionals can hold some data, but when looking at like the bigger picture, I think they're a little bit less valuable because there's less attendance, less people played. It's more sectional to be basically a super extra locals. Like, it's not a small event considering it's like 60 players, which is 6 rounds of Swiss. So it's not like it's a small event. It's just you get more weird things based on the area and who's able to go out to play in those store regionals. On top of the fact that because there's less games played, you do get more offbeat decks that are able to top. So, like in the Store Regional, just as an example, there was a Virus Imperial that topped. That's kind of off meta. A Ragnarlordmon that topped. That's definitely off meta at this point. And a Black War Greymon, which is topped. And I think Black War Greymon has also topped. No, Black War Greymon has topped a single time in the Booster Box Online Regional. So it's like kind of, these are all like very fringe rogue decks where it's like they can win, but have a harder time the longer the tournament goes, which is why we're seeing them here. So that's kind of cool that, you know, there still is something a little bit more playable in the meta, but realistically, we have about 9 meta decks and about 4 fringe meta decks, and then everything else is like barely even registering on the scale. So that's kind of the BT17 meta breakdown in a nutshell, or EX7. And we'll have the last event when we get that data for it. Hopefully that'll be by next week. And I am competing in a store regional that was supposed to be EX7, but Bandai decided to have other ideas. So, kind of transitioning into the next topic. I don't know how many other store regionals are firing this weekend or how many other larger tournaments are firing this weekend, but Bandai decided to do something really interesting and actually say the week of a set release, like the actual set release, they are allowing the newest set to be tournament legal. They have never really done that before, or if they have, the TOs kind of fought back against it because of the lack of accessibility on the cards because, the set literally just came out. Sure, we had pre-release, but not everyone gets everything they need for pre-release. They could have placed their orders and now not get the cards that they need because they placed their orders, or they're spending like way more on pre-release pricing. Like it's not a good situation. The store that I'm going to be participating at said that Bandai didn't exactly tell them which format it was supposed to be based on the time frame. So they initially told everyone, okay, don't worry, Bandai's normal rules and procedures is 1 week needs to have elapsed in order for the set to be more tournament legal for higher levels of competitive play. But they literally contacted the store, I think like not even a week ago. Like it was probably on, I think it was on literally Monday. They got the notification that, hey, we need you guys to change your event description and mark it so that 2.0 is actually legal. And like I'm not insanely pissed because the decks that I'm playing aren't really needing a whole lot of the cards. It is a surprise and a shakeup for the format that I really wasn't exactly anticipating. And Bandai decided to pull the rug out from under us and change the format after the store had already made their announcement, after already trying to reach out to Bandai. So this is more of a Bandai fault, not reaching out and clarifying what they mean. And they've also not clarified what they mean before, because we saw that with pre-release and the pre-release debacle of how do hybrids actually work in this pre-release more specifically. So are you familiar with how the rules is written versus the rules as as people are interpreting them when it comes to the pre-release for hybrids? Oh, he probably had to. Okay, you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, something weird on my side of the. It just sounded like static, and then I just couldn't hear you.
Okay. But yeah, so as I was saying, do you know the difference between the rules as written versus the rules as interpreted for the Tamer evolution on pre-release for this set?
As far to my knowledge, I think so, because I'm trying to think here.
Because that got a lot of people really confused because Bandai didn't exactly clarify it, and they didn't update their rules to clarify it.
So I think in BT4 it was, where it was like a whole bubble thing where it says red tamer for such cost and everything. It didn't have the black text boxes and everything, right?
Yeah,
so if I'm going to guess, I'm assuming like based on BT4, those cards, for example, in BT4, you could evolve on a different color tamer because you could evolve on top any color, but the newer ones have the black text box where they list a specific tamer, if I remember correctly. I don't think they have the tamer circle.
You have it backwards. So the new cards have the tamer circle. The old cards didn't have the tamer circle before. The old cards stated as part of their text, like it's basically as rules text, that they have to evolve over specific colors. So Bandai was just like, okay, you have to, because of that, you have to evolve on top of the specific colors. So in their pre-release rule set, they listed that is just how hybrids function going forward. Then in BT12, We did start getting name-based tamer evolution, and that just applied under the rules of Special Digivolution Condition, where you still have to meet that. So fast forward all the way up until now, we do have a circle that is considered a standard evolution for all hybrid Digimon to be able to digivolve on tamers. Well, they didn't change the rules to be able to reflect that. So in the rules as written, they still state that you have to evolve on top of the proper color. Similar to how with options, you have to have the proper color present in order to actually, use the card. So when I first initially was covering pre-release, I kind of stayed away from talking about it a little bit, but my initial interpretation was follow the rules as written. I didn't say that on purpose to avoid scrutiny on, oh, hey, you're wrong and incorrect. I just kind of left it ambiguous on purpose. But my initial interpretation is rules as written. Then a whole bunch of level 0 judges are just like, well, technically the circle means it's a standard evolution, and standard evolutions with the rules as written also means that you can ignore the color requirements. Therefore, you should ignore the other rules involving tamers and hybrids and just follow standard traditional evolution rules, which, again, they're two conflicting sets of rules that Bandai has not clarified yet, and we're already a week into their special celebration event, and the fact that we don't have that rule clarification is just bad communication on Bandai's part, which, going back to the whole moral of the story with the LGS and the regional that was EX7 that's now 2.0, Bandai's just really bad at communicating, which is unfortunate because, those are kind of big deals to know what format we're playing in and what rules we're playing under. I would actually think that they are. So that's a boo-boo on Bandai's part. In my perspective, but Bandai's never been that great at communication.
Yeah, because sorry. So I had that backwards, but I know I haven't passed the judge exam or anything. I haven't tried it lately because I'm trying to focus on college right now. But
Believe me, their judge exam is stupid.
Yeah, really is. But I would have interpreted the circle means, oh, standard evolution, therefore I can evo on top of different colors. That's how I would have interpreted it.
And that's how a lot of the level 0 judges are, because they turned a text-based evolution into a standard-based evolution, but the rules still, as written, state that that's not actually the case. You still need the proper colors, which which is where a lot of this initial confusion came from. And I'm not saying it really impacted the event at all, because at the end of the day, it's kind of just up to the TO to decide whether they want to implement it as written or as interpreted. So it's just up to the TO. So if anyone has yet to play in their pre-release / celebration event for 2.0, I definitely would ask the TO what the rules for tamers and hybrids, what you want them to rule it under. Because some TOs will be like, nope, rules is written. Some TOs will be like, it's fine. Bandai didn't exactly update it or communicate well, so we'll let the rules as interpreted go.
But, yeah, because I know I'm one of the players that haven't done their pre-release yet. Mine starts Thursday, so it is something that we do have to talk about for at least my locals.
Yeah, and I know other territories and regions got delayed by a week or two, so their special celebration event got delayed as well, so they all would have that same style of question. But we don't actually have a official answer because Bandai has yet to actually officially answer it. So we still have the two rules technically up in the air floating around in space. That's why it's always important to communicate, at least with your store, your LGS or TO, so that way you can be as prepared as you possibly can. Which is something I wish I could say going into the store regional that I'm playing in, because if I was going to be banking on a 2.0 deck, like if I was going to use this opportunity to practice Lord Nightmon, based on my pulls, if anyone hasn't watched my pull rate video, I have not pulled enough Lord Nightmon X antibodies in order to make the deck, and I wouldn't be able to get Lord Nightmon X antibodies in order to actually play the deck, so I guess that kind of sucks if that was something I was looking forward to play. And knowing some people will have it prepared because they bought more booster boxes or cases or whatever during pre-release, again, that just kind of sucks for me as a player. So Bandai, please communicate more and better, and that's all. That's the moral of the story, is just communicate more, so that way we could try to avoid as much confusions as possible. But speaking of the events, because basically this current format, which is EX7, is borderline over outside of the last little bit of data and looking at the big picture. Probably not going to be talking that much in terms of that. We already kind of covered it, and we already expect the low impact that 2.0 has on the meta, but it's still going to impact the market for where the card game currently is. Because the market's something I generally don't talk a whole lot on my channel anymore. I used to when I was like more of an active seller, and I've started like dialing it back both in my purchases and my sellatures. But I think that where the game currently is in the secondary market is very, very weird and wild. And I think that depending on how much 2.0 is actually out there, 2.0 could actually be like a smash hit, or it could just be more of the contention and frustration that we're currently having with the last couple of sets.
Yeah, because I mean, if I'm gonna take, for example, like BT 15 or even the EX7, like, because with a lot of the hits, it's like they're not good value hits unless you hit like the $20 card, then it SR. And I mean, as far as like 2.0, there's not really a lot of cards that seem that powerful. But at the same time, though, it seems like Bandai wants to try to support a lot of decks from here on out, so to say. Because like even like in this set, Trains even got more support in 2.0. It's like not a meta deck, but Trains are still getting support. So it's kind of interesting because it depends on what they come out with in the future. Could help determine the value of the cards in this, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm not saying like, oh, Trailmon, a common card, is going to make waves across the market. Like Bandai is known for actually having really good flavor for their cards that they choose and the effects that follow said cards. The more specific example that I'm talking about is like, okay, if this set is actually shorted, like some people are kind of reporting, because my LGS did not get their full allocation. One of my other LGSs that I was debating about going to, they just are getting theirs functionally late. So, like, something funky is kind of starting to happen with this set that could impact how the secondary market for it actually holds up. Because if it is short printed and it does have this high of demand because of all of the super rares and the good opening feels and all of the interesting decks for newer players and more casual players, if all of those spiral into a perfect storm where this set actually was underprinted, that's going to make all of the SRs now be in contention to start spiking even harder, like what we've seen with BT18 and, or not BT18, BT16, BT17, and EX6. Because if anyone's curious about the timeline of events on why those sets more specifically were really short printed, it's because, like, it's literally because of the damage RB1 has done to the game. It shook enough. It sold poorly for starters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It did indeed sell very poorly. It was overprinted, which again, not good. It was more expensive for a store to buy into, which again, not good, especially since we know it underperformed. And when stores had to order that, and they saw the like how bad the set was doing, that gave them very little confidence to pre-order the next couple of sets, which at that time was, drumroll please, BT16, EX6, because those were a month apart, and inversely, because they didn't have the newer sales datas to see if the game is getting in a more stable spot, which because of the BT15 bans, it kind of wasn't, so stores were still kind of rocky. BT17 also wasn't necessarily ordered as much as some of the other stuff. So this could impact, like, that kind of shows how well a set does can impact the overall prices on the singles, because reasonably, with these high pull rates, Special Booster 2.0, the prices of the singles should not be as high as they currently are for pre-sale, to be honest. Like, I'm just going to go over some of the pre-sale pricing as of the recording of this podcast, and the most expensive base super rare is Lucimon Chaos Mode for $16. No way in hell do I think that card is actually worth $16, let alone with the potential pull rates allowing players to be able to open that more often in any given booster box period, because you basically have slightly more than a 50-50 chance on seeing a Chaos Mode. And then going down the list, just not going over the full list, but just kind of showing you where pre-release prices kind of are. In terms of the high end, you have Lucimon X Antibody, which is 1550. You have Lord Nightmon X Antibody, which is about $14. Then it jumps way down to Shadow Seraphimon, which is about $10. So like Shadow Seraphimon being $10, I could kind of see it, but at the same time, again, the lower pull rates should mean it shouldn't be hitting as high of highs as what we have seen in the past with other more generically good aces like Cherubimon Ace, which is currently like $30-$40, which is insane to me, thinking a super rare is $30-$40. And we've seen other like highly good generic super rares also going for $30-$40 in the form of X Antibody Protoform. So do I reasonably think any of these will hit that high? No. But do I think that these should be the current price that they are? Also no. Obviously this is pre-sale, so before the floodgates are open, the stores that are able to sell on pre-sale are trying to make as much money as they possibly can.
Yeah, because I know the prices are definitely weird. Like the X Antibody Protoform, I understand where that one might be coming from because it's kind of hyped for the Lord Nightmon X Antibody, because some decks you're really like using the Cerberus one package with that, and you do need to see that card kind of quite often. But like the Cherubimon Ace, that one doesn't make sense to me at all, because there's only one deck I could think of off the top of my head that might have used that, and that was Numemon, but Numemon's not really a thing anymore, so I don't even know what deck's using Cherubi Ace off the top of my head.
Which you bring that up. I'm just trying to think like what actual, like, based on where the meta is, I honestly am kind of kerfuffled because yellow's not highly prominent outside of Vaccine Armor, which isn't really using Cherubi Ace, and no real green deck is really in the top like echelons of where the format currently is. So yeah, it is just really interesting to see like it's that high because of the high demand and low supply. That's the layman's terms of it. But from a more meta perspective, like it's just more of a poorly, not really poorly designed. It's just a lack of future proof card. So it's just like, oh, anytime, like, because aces are so good, and Cherubi Ace is just one of the better aces in the entire game. That's partially why it's being propped up so high, on top of a couple of buyouts. Like, I think that card had a buyout like once or twice on it. So, like, that's not helping.
Yeah.
But do I reasonably think anything from 2.0 is going to get bought out? No. It honestly shouldn't. And I really hope the prices come down, because The biggest fear that a lot of players are going to have is 2.0 is basically Nationals format. So, with this being the set that people like, the most recent set for Nationals, that puts a lot of stress on the set and a lot of stress on the players to make sure that they could get their cards for the decks that they're going to be playing. So anyone who's playing Lord Nightmon is probably going to start buying up Lord Nightmon on bulk if they're not looking to open up the booster boxes to try to hunt for it themselves. So that level of demand is probably going to dictate that the card's price is going to go up. Granted, it has to come down when the floodgates actually get released in terms of how TCG Player works before it goes back up. But if if the supply of the set starts drying up, then it definitely is going to be something that is going to be prone to spike pretty quickly and pretty aggressively, based on just the spiky nature of how other cards have been handled in the past.
Yeah, because I know you also mentioned like there's not that many cards in here that you would need that are like at the beginning of the episode we talked about how as a meta perspective, meta player, there's like only a few cards you may want to have, so you're not really going to want to open this set. But at the same time though, I also feel like if the cards are in that high of demand, that's going to cause people to want to buy this product more to try to pull that said card to be that get that money value card, so to say. But
Yeah,
it's just going to be like a how fast are people going to buy it? Are people going to let the market try to recover and stabilize? Or are they going to just keep buying the card and like just make people go, oh, you know what? Since this keeps getting bought out like this, I could keep upping the price more and more kind of situation.
yeah, because we could take a look at like the EX7 set just as an example of like, oh, cards should reasonably be coming down. Some cards just literally aren't for the dumbest of reasons, and some cards are. So like, the perfect example of this is you could look at the secret rares in that set if you're going to try to compare secrets to secrets. There's no secret rare that's over $20 in the special booster, or not special booster, in EX7. So EX7, both secret rares are sitting at about like 15-ish dollars. People were hyping up Beelstar X Antibody, but that card literally has proven to do nothing, and the deck that it's played in not strong enough to warrant a lot of people being able to buy into that type of a card. So I think like the way that these secrets are going to be working as well, they should be on the lower price spectrum as well, because we have Susanomon, which any hybrid player is not actually trying to play Susanomon. It's just Ancients 2.0. Then you have Zed Millenniumon, which is a good card. Probably one of the better secret rares of the set in terms of playability, because it has a deck that you could actually functionally build towards, which would increase its overall demand, but it's not a mandatory 4 of compared to some other secrets that we've had in the past. So it's like maybe a 2 of at best. So it'll be pretty easy for players to get the amount that they want. So its price shouldn't be that much higher because it doesn't have that much demand. And then Lucimon, sure, there's Lucimon cards in the set, but if you're actually building towards Lucimon, that deck is going to be one of the most expensive in the entire game. And that barrier is going to basically do the exact opposite and make Satan mode go down in price, because you're only going to be using that in a Lucimon deck. And if Lucimon is too expensive to buy into, people aren't going to do that, and they would literally just put that money and invest towards something else, or even just max rating their current deck. So I honestly think like Lucimon Satan mode should be the card that falls the most in terms of like market price, compared to the other two, which have some case usage and more playable outside of their just one specific deck. But in terms of like how some of the super rares would react, I think like we could hit a couple of cards that are like, again, using EX7 as a comparison. A couple of cards probably are going to react similarly to Hexablaumon. So Hexablaumon, when the set first came out for EX7, was sitting at around like $10-ish. Then, as people realized blue decks are some of the best decks in the game, and there's no reason never to not run him in any deck that uses blue, people started buying him up, and lo and behold, now he's a $20 card. And there's still plenty of EX7 to go around. So that set still has plenty of supply, but that demand for the card has gone up. But we also could see some cards that are acting similar to Sandrilmon, where that deck has literally proven to do absolutely nothing. It's a fine deck, don't get me wrong, but it is more of the casuals deck because that card also hasn't dropped in price and has been hovering around like $13 to $15 basically since the set's release. So like it's going to be interesting to see how this set kind of reacts and responds with the overall secondary market and the current landscape of the meta competition.
Yeah. Plus, I think another important thing that you also mentioned earlier was because I'll even take my locals for example. So, they did buy like I think 2 cases of RB01. I think they may still have a few boxes of RB01 still sitting on their shelves. But the problem is because when it came to like BT16, it wasn't just my store, but there seemed like a lot of stores they didn't realize how much of a demand BT16 was. And when EX6 came around, my locals went and thought, "Oh yeah, we actually didn't pre-order any of EX6 because we didn't think you guys would want that." Like they didn't know it was because EX6 have never been really as good, and RB01 kind of made them think, "Yeah, maybe we shouldn't invest that much into it." And then EX7 comes around. They did order for that this time. They got like a case, but they sold out of our EX7, and they were trying to get some more if possible. So, and I think my locals now has 2 cases of 2.0. So hopefully we're gonna like my area. We're gonna be okay. Like as far as everyone getting what they need. But as you mentioned, people could be buying out 2.0 because it's like, oh, I don't want to trust TCG player getting me the stuff I need in time for the stuff I need, so to say. Or people are going to be like, I want to get 2.0 because I want to crack open some packs. I want to try to make some money from it, and so on and so forth, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting because if anyone's unfamiliar with how Bandai does their supply chain, like not talking about the whole shipping aspect, just how much stock they have of any given set. 90% of it comes from pre-orders. Like a store will ask the distributor to pre-order. The distributor will then tell Bandai the numbers, and then Bandai will print according to those numbers with a percentage of buffer. I don't know what their percentage buffer is. If I mean, I would hope that they have a decent buffer, but it doesn't seem like they do. But regardless, that's kind of just the flow on how allocations kind of work. Because then the distributor will get all of the stuff and then send it out based on what the store is pre-ordered for. Which is why stores have to pre-order like 8 months in advance, like almost a half a year in advance. So that way Bandai knows exactly how much to print, and Bandai's print supply is getting more tighter because they have currently 6 TCGs in the works, with a 7th one coming. So, like, yes, you could make the argument that if Bandai didn't run so many TCGs, then maybe that percentage buffer would be greater towards Digimon and some of their other games that are currently doing well, like Dragon Ball Fusion World is doing okay. It's not gangbusters, but it's doing okay. And obviously One Piece right now is basically their golden child, and they're just trying to chase that same level of money. Whether Gundam will actually do that is not this exact focus, but that's just kind of the general idea on how Bandai prints their sets and why stores have to order so far in advance. So if anything that shakes the current not meta landscape, but shakes the current confidence landscape of the store, we will feel whatever impact that's going to have, whether it's for a positive or a negative, months later. So this set 2.0, if it does well, like they already sold their 2.5, so we're not going to see it then, but we're going to start seeing like, okay, we trust Bandai to actually, you know, make it so that the game is in a healthy enough state for us to want to buy into so we could sell to our players. So we'll probably see that, like the effects of it come March, like honestly.
Yeah, because I mean, the idea of that, what we practically have like of 2.0, this is probably what we're gonna have, as you said. So the fact that we are using this set, and this is practically going to be the actual set, because I know there is that side set in December, but that's not going to make a major shift in power away from 2.0, I would say.
I mean,
So
the scramble cards are the most important things that come in that, which will
yeah,
define and like change the entire format around them because Japan uses scrambles in basically everything. And I hate it when Bandai prints these generic staples because it forces everyone to need them because that's now how the game is played as dictated by Bandai. Per power creep through these generic staples. We've seen it with the training cards. Memory boosts were not exactly on that same power spectrum, but memory boost was the start of when they were trying to fix certain aspects of the game. But because they fix certain aspects of the game, that warps it literally around the single individual cards. So
yeah,
the side set in December is going to sell well just because we know the scrambles are in it. But
yeah. But
I
what I
get
mean is
what you're
like,
saying.
yeah, there's like no actual deck that comes from that side set. It's going to be giving support and boosting the power of other decks for sure. But as far as like decks that come from that side set, there is no decks that are going to come from that side set. So it's practically just supporting 2.0, and we'll have like, because what regionals is in, or nationals is in like January, right? So we have literally barely 3 months to get your hands on the like on the cards that you need for nationals. But when you also consider in the store regionals, I don't even think there's any other regionals that are happening
No, there's like a
besides.
couple. I think there's like a Ultimate Cup and a regionals in December, like just one or two events in December outside of store regionals. So there still are events and there still are last chances, but that's going to make it really hard to be able to actually get a solid gauge on where the format is because we don't have a lot of events to be able to pull data from. And then because of the December set, it almost like splits the format in half where it's just like pre-scramble and post-scramble. So like it's not like the data that I'm going to be gathering from playing 2.0 at least in the store regional I'm going to be using is going to be indicative of where the meta actually could end up being come nationals. So it kind of makes that like data analysis point a little bit on the muddier side.
Mhm. But yeah, so because this is going to really rely on based on, because I know like Gaia Force Gaming, I think I don't know if he still does. I haven't played in a little bit, but I know he does weekly tournaments. So anybody who does like a weekly online tournament where there could be a lot of potential people playing, I think people are definitely going to be paying attention to that to look and going, okay, what's topping? What were people playing? And then kind of trying to use that as a way to determine what the meta may be. I mean, we already have an idea what it's going to be, but it's not it's not a permanent super glued in place kind of thing. It's just placed on there, and we're like watching to see if it's going to fall or if it's going to stay by itself, kind of thing. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like we have the idea, we just don't know how like what the end result is actually going to be. And based on the ever-changing landscape of how 2.0 could be developing as a meta, like that obviously can have an impact on the overall sales of the set going for like going throughout its lifespan, which is until Special Booster 2.5. Because most stores don't generally try to order more of a set, and most distributors, because the print allocations are really tight, generally don't have a lot of extra to be able to sell to stores. So, kind of like whatever we have for the most part, outside of like maybe a second wave for the technical release, um, is kind of just it. And that could be very concerning from a player standpoint, knowing that like, hey, this set might just be good enough to where it gets bought out and then the price starts going through the roof on not only just the singles, but the booster box itself. Because we've had booster boxes where, okay, a single card does well, but that doesn't increase the value of the booster box overall because everything else has been decreasing with it. So like you'll still see a lot of booster boxes that are like older booster boxes with one good card that's worth the chase, and then everything else is like awful. Like it's legitimately awful in terms of like resale value. And because of that type of behavior, that's what generally creates what's known as a toxic asset, which means it's just going to sit in the store shelf because nobody wants to open it because the risk is too high compared to the reward. So that's generally something a lot of people also have to look at is the risk too high for me to not want to buy the set? And the answer, and this is kind of why RB1 did so poorly, was because the pull rates were astronomically bad for the new stuff, which is what anyone and everyone actually cared about. The reprints are like take it or leave it, but the fact that the new cards were really hard to pull on is what helped cause that set to be a toxic asset because the risk was just too high in order to get even some of the more basic cards. Like that's why we had Manzemon from that set when Numemon was at its height in power, literally was like a $20 to $30 rare, is because the rares were harder to pull than the super rares. So that made it like that was a more isolated incident in terms of like a rare being actually like insanely expensive outside of like a alt art promo or whatever. But that created the toxicity because I can't feel confident buying RB1 expecting my pull rate to be decent enough to have a chance at success in terms of getting the cards that I wanted. So that was everyone's initial fear going into the set, and now that that's kind of squashed, I feel very confident about 2.5, basically doing the exact same pull rates. Like, I feel very confident that that's exactly what's going to happen, and that's going to make 2.5 feel pretty good. I don't know how good 2.5 is going to feel because what they did with BT18 is some of the decks that they split up, they put into BT19, and then they just during the fusion of those sets put all of those split up cards back together. So that allowed us to make full decks. I don't know based on the themes of BT19, the second half, and BT20, if it's going to hit that same high as what we currently have with 2.0.
Right, especially since they're just now revealing like they haven't even revealed anything of what BT20 is supposed to be in Japan. We have like a thing that what it tells us it's supposed to be themed of, but it doesn't show us what the cards are.
No, and according to the distributor page, like looking at a distributor website and looking at the description for the product, it's actually partially wrong because we don't know what's in BT20, but we do know what's in BT18. So them saying like, hey, Royal Base is getting support, well, that was before anyone knew that Royal Base was going to be all in Special Booster 2.0. And I highly doubt that Royal Base is going to get support in BT20. It could. We don't know. But the chances are dramatically lower because they have more incentive to try to support some of the tamer base decks that the second half, or the cross base decks that the second half of BT19 is all about.
Yeah. And then I think what we do know about 2.5 is they are going to continue doing the lucky packs. So, because I know that was announced before opening up 2.0, I was a little bit hesitant. I was like, what is this lucky pack? What is it going to do? Is it going to be something good? But now after 2.0 and seeing what the lucky packs are for us here, it's like, oh, these are really stupid good and everything. So it now kind of makes me a little bit more ready for 2.5. I guess you could say.
Yeah, like I'm more mentally prepared for 2.5. Like 2.5 based on, so like I bought 4 boxes of 2.0. Reasonably with how, I'll just say with how good this set is, I should have bought 6. Like I reasonably should have bought 6 boxes. My store didn't have 6 boxes to sell me, granted. So there is that aspect. I physically could not get 6 boxes from my main LGS that I play at this point. My new main LGS. I've changed LGSs a couple of times, just because stuff happens and they stop playing. They stop supporting Digimon, and whatnot. But at this new LGS that I'm currently playing at, they did not have 6 boxes to be able to sell to me when I went for pre-release and picked up the 4 that I had already ordered. And like part of that is because the celebration event kind of limits sales in a sense. Like it increases sales, but it also limits the ability to actually just sell the product because stores need a specific amount of product in order to run those events, and they can't sell until those events fire. So that's the only small like little hiccup on like where boxes can magically appear or disappear.
Hmm. Yeah, because I know like before in the past, like one of my LGSs, they're like, oh, we can't sell anything until after the pre-release, just because they weren't sure how many they were, but like the LGS I go to, they were like they were more comfortable to like at least sell some because they're like we have another case on reserve, so we could make sure this case is set aside for the pre-release tournament. Like there's no reason why an entire case should be gone for pre-release kind of situation. So we could use the second case to kind of start selling.
Yeah, and that's what my LGS currently did. They were just like, okay, we generally know the average amount of players that we're going to get on the day that we're holding this event. So we feel confident that we could sell you the 4 booster boxes. And that's why I pre ordered the 4 booster boxes from them. At a pretty decent price. 85 a box is definitely really good. I know, unfortunately, because of the damage of RB1, that made BT16 and EX6 more higher
Harder to
priced.
find.
Yeah, harder to price, therefore higher price. And because of that, that actually worked towards the community's overall detriment because that created a price memory that a lot of stores are not wanting to get rid of. Like that's why it's very hard to find a booster box under $90 now, is because of the price memory that we showed stores that were comfortable with paying over $100 per booster box. Granted, like, yes, this is getting into the whole argument of, oh, the MSRP, blah, blah, blah. Like, that aside, most stores will generally sell for like a more bulk price, like a discount, because you're buying the whole booster box rather than, oh, I'm just going to buy like 2, 3 packs. Open up the box, ruin the box potentially in terms of its overall value, sealed, so that way I could just buy 2 or 3 packs. Like, yes, in the long run, that's generally going to work out for the stores more because then uh, people have to buy those packs so that they could charge more for them. But most stores are nice enough to do like this bulk pricing, which is what my LGS did, to sell it to me. They still made money off of me because what stores buy them for is like 60, between like 60 and 75 is usually like where stores buy, like how much they're actually spending on a booster box. But because of that price memory, they don't want to let go of their profits if they don't have to. And we're proving to them that they don't have to. Whether that's actually a good thing or a bad thing is to be determined, but that's, again, partially why it's harder to find booster boxes, even when they're actually in supply of some of these newer sets, why they're more expensive than they have been. It's not necessarily because of inflation, that's part of it, but there's multiple other factors that go into it. And like it's only unfortunate because the game recently has gotten more expensive, and that's very disheartening for me as a player because I was used to paying X price for so long, and now the game's just magically getting more expensive. It seems like it's not really magic if you actually think about it, but The game just now is like doubling, almost tripling in price in terms of the cost of certain cards and decks. And that just, it makes players uncomfortable spending a lot of money. Like it generally does. That's why Pokemon is as accessible and as popular as it is because the game's accessible. Like buying singles for a deck, you'll usually spend not an arm and a leg. And the way promos work and the spiking of SRs and staple cards being introduced and all that jazz only actually made the game more expensive to play, not less expensive. Sure, we're still less expensive than a lot of other TCGs, but in comparison to where we were, the game's price has definitely increased.
Yeah, because I know definitely, like Digimon's like one of his big things was at early on was a unique game system that we use, which is our memory gauge, but also the price was like another thing. But now, as we're seeing the price slowly starting to creep up a little bit more and more now we're kind of losing the momentum of why our game is so much better than others, so to say.
Yeah, which is why, like, to kind of loop back towards the beginning of the conversation, and to kind of start to wrap up the podcast a little bit, like that's why this set, if you could buy it at a decent price as a newer player, it's probably a fantastic experience to not only just open up the set and have all of the good hits and pull rates on it, but to be able to actually start building a deck out of the set. And even though it's not going to be the most meta competitive, it still helps the overall accessibility of the game because when they do stuff like the advanced deck for Terriermon and they're just like, okay, this is a really good product, you get this, you could be competitive, it's a solid deck out of the box, which it is. But when you have the caveat of, oh, but you need to buy a $30 secret rare that you're going to need 3 to 4 of, that kind of sours the experience of a newer player where it's just like, oh, my $30 deck is now turning into a $200 to $300 investment. That's not what exactly I signed up for. And most players will just look at that and just be like, I guess I just won't do it. Especially if they're on the more casual level. They're not going to just be the big whales for the high competitive cards. Some will. Don't get me wrong. Some definitely will, but not all casual, like more casual players are like that. So having that, like, and they kind of did something similar with the Liberator starter decks, where it's just like you're supposed to buy the starter deck and then buy EX7, but when the super rares cost just as much as the actual full deck itself, it again doesn't necessarily put the best taste in players' mouths, especially on top of the fact that those decks need promos, which are even more expensive than anything you could reasonably pull inside of the set. So yeah, like they just kind of had a couple of hiccups and really poor decision making, but I think like what they decided to try to do with Special Booster 2.0 definitely makes the game more new player friendly, even if the meta isn't necessarily receptive towards what's in the set.
Yeah, I do hope that after 2.0 and 2.5, maybe Bandai could take some notes and go, hey, players seem to really like that there was more SRs, more hits in booster boxes. I'm not saying they're going to make that a permanent thing from here on out, but it would be nice if they a one increase one or maybe even two SRs in a box again. Kind of
Oh,
thing.
I would love that, especially since now they seem to really be high on 12 super rares per set. Making it so that we have 8 instead of 7 would really help alleviate some of the issues that we're having because some of the price spiking is because of the increased super rares and the lower like amount to be able to hit that card. So like that's what's helping cause these price spikes even more is the bad hit, like the bad pull rates compared to how many there's actually in the set. Like these are all just compounding factors on one another that Bandai very easily can start alleviating. And if they do, that's just going to make the game better overall because not everything needs to be like Yu-Gi-Oh or Magic the Gathering where you need like full play sets of hyper expensive cards. That's not what a TCG is actually about. TCG is just about being able to play the game, first of all, and second of all, being able to show off bling. Like, if you are the type of player and collector to want to show off bling, that's the secondary part. Is like, hey, dude, look how cool and sick this card is. And that's the fun of it. It's just like I was able to pull that. You could pull it too, and that's what creates that like drive.
Yeah, because I know I like to show off every once in a while my Ghost Alphamon that I have and everything for sure. Just because, like I said, Alphamon's my favorite. So me as like I don't collect high rarity cards, but that's like any Alphamon stuff. Everyone in my locals knows hit me up with that.
Right. So, and that's all part of the fun and experience of a TCG, and I think like this set definitely encapsulates the best of what Digimon has to offer and could offer. And like you said, I really hope post unification after Special Booster 2.5 going into like some of the other sets, if they do want to continue with the current pull rates in terms of what a normal booster box operates under, well, they could take a reference and see how well Special Booster 2.0 and 2.5 did, despite being an overbloated set, and be like, okay, we could make this a little bit more friendlier for the players. We'll throw them a bone for Pete's sake, instead of trying to make things harder just to try to squeeze more sales. Like, because that's all that increase in bump in SRs was just them trying to find a way to increase their sales. And it so far hasn't exactly worked the way they wanted it to. If anything, it just made the players pissed even more because cards are now more volatile than they've ever been before. And that means that the game is currently in an unstable space when that type of thing happens. So hopefully they could really use this time to learn on what these sets are doing correctly and kind of just reset and like recenter themselves to be able to put the game into a better position post unification. And that's all I really want. Like, I meta wise, everyone knows I'm already like up to my head in complete and utter disgust and disappointment, and to the point where if a year past unification the game does not get any better, I am very very tempted on just quitting. And that's something I don't want to do, but Bandai, if they don't fix themselves, is something that other players, not me included, would be considering about doing. Where it's just like, look, we're a year out past unification. Promos are still an issue. We still aren't getting promos on time with Japan, which means we're still having different formats. Like there's a laundry list of things that could very easily go wrong to make players not happy with unification, and that's something as a player I don't want to see. I want the best out of the game, and that's why I'm so critical on it.
Yeah, because I mean, especially when you consider like the thing is that Bandai really has no like they kind of do have an influence obviously, but they really don't care about the second market. So it's like, why wouldn't you just want to have people buy more booster boxes that affect you versus not opening up the booster boxes and then buying the singles, you know?
Right,
It's
like
a weird idea to think about.
give us the reason and incentive to open up the booster boxes, rather than just creating toxic dated assets that is hard for stores to get rid of unless something magically starts spiking and or gets support, and then that creates the artificial value back into older sets, which has not been very good and the case for a while, because most of the time the power creep means that you just don't even need the older cards, except for block 3 cards, because block 3 was just too powerful. But we've already talked to that in ad nauseum at this point. But yeah, so I think that the game so far is showing good signs of improving, and I hope Special Booster 2.0 and Special Booster 2.5 does very well to not only give stores the confidence back to try to actually make the game more accessible, but to put it into perspectives that Bandai actually pays attention to the fact that Digimon is still going this strong, in spite of the fact that they have 7 TCGs and have been actively doing everything that they can to not support the game the way they should, because they could easily support the game more. They very easily could. Do they want to? They haven't shown us that they do. But any final thoughts, Jay Stewart, before we wrap this thing up?
I mean, the only other thing I could say is to anybody who is listening and that is going to pre-release this, but or still going to be opening up booster boxes. I mean, or have not experienced it, so to say. I mean, this really is to me like I bought 3 booster boxes, and this does feel like a really good set. Again, like I haven't felt this good about a set since BT13. Like, part of me kind of wishes, man, I really should have asked my store if I could have bought a case, potentially, like saved up money for a case. And now I'm even considering for 2.5. Maybe I could save money and like buy a case now or something for that, if that's even physically possible. And if I could get at a good price.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about upping the 4 to a 6, just because if the pull rates are this generous, 6 should reasonably be able to get me anything I want in terms of a full playset of any given SR, which is good, because most of the time I just buy 4, see what I get, then just buy the rest. But if the feel is good, then I would want to give them my money to support the game more than what I have. Because I used to buy a case every single set, but the game hasn't felt good to open for a while in my perspective, which is why I stopped buying a case, on top of it being very expensive, every single set buying a case. And I didn't have the capital for that. But I think that the game definitely is headed towards a better direction, knowing and experiencing what 2.5 had to offer, or 2.0 had to offer, and knowing that it's going to be similar with 2.5. There we go, recovered. So I think if that's it, this is a good place to kind of end on a more happy note for a change, compared to the more cynical note. I think like this was a good critical discussion that kind of should hopefully put things into perspective if you actually made it all the way to the end. And if you did, I want to say thank you everyone for actually listening all the way to the end. And if you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please make sure to share it with others on social media so that way it gets spread, on top of the fact that you want to also do all the social media doobly-doos, so that way it helps this type of content with any of the given algorithms on the platforms that they are on. So I want to thank everyone again for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.